Eons ago, I started a project with a Jeep. Let's keep doing that, but this time, I'm using hammers. If anyone's curious what happened to that Jeep, here it is. It's sort of just a collection of parts. This box came with my welder, and collection of parts it remains. And now we're at this stage. Hammer forms. I got some hammer forms here. I did a trial run in which I screwed up a lot of trying to make the fenders. And I should really clean up some of these wood tools that I'm not going to use. Good preparation, me. Anyways, here's basically the idea. I have both fenders carved out of wood, sort of. I have the characteristic arch here along the side, and it kind of transitions to a sharp crease along the front. And the back has kind of an angle on it. And I did a right and a left, and I got a top panel, which I can go either way. I clamp these together like so with a piece of metal in between, and then I hammer it over the form. I already made one of them, but honestly I might remake it because I made this with a different hammer form, a worse hammer form, and it ended up worse. But, you know, learning is a process, right? But, you know, if I can preserve it, that would be great. I used quite a lot of torch action on this one, probably unnecessarily, but who knows, fire is fun, we can play with more fire. Now, optimally, I would clamp the hammer form over the thing, like so, and clamp it in the vise, but this piece here sticks out quite a ways, and I need to leave that for attaching to the actual Jeep body, and that blocks me from getting the wood in the vise, so this is going to be slightly more challenging. I'm going to have to find a way to clamp this down. Wood clamps. Now the way this works is it kind of bends over here and it bends around the corner here. The test one that I did, I couldn't get the nice sharp corner here, so I just cut it to make it work. And I preemptively cut this already. So we're not going to worry about this back angle until we get this nice gentle curve here hammered out. And to do that, I'm going to use a body hammer. It's pretty flat, it's not very heavy, and that's because we're not just going to be pounding the crap out of it. We want to gently curve the whole thing over. And as we start curving it over, this is going to get kind of wavy in through here. I'll show you how to tuck shrink those, by which I mean I'll show you a lot of bad tuck shrinking, so that might be fun. I don't know. I've never actually done tuck shrinking successfully without way too much work and ruining the metal. But for now, it's hammer time! I gotta stop making that joke. That's a terrible joke. The main problem here is when I knock down one of the folds, the other ones pop up. And it's kind of a back and forthy sort of thing because I don't want one of them to pop up and crease, like fold over, because that's going to cause a lot of problems. So I'm trying to work it down slowly. And if this Jeep project is slightly new to you, I totally understand. It was the first couple things I did on this channel, and people really didn't start watching until maybe a month after the last installment of this project. Alright, we got these little ripples sticking out. Now the way that I've read to really handle these is to start at the top, try to shrink them on the way down. You know, start up here, kind of get it flattened all the way down. Start up here, flatten all the way down. And eventually, it'll shrink and form a nice smooth arch. Now I think the proper way to do it is with a straight edge on a hammer. Start at the top and pound down, but I've never actually used this hammer before. Looks like I'm just marring it, I'm not even bending it. I think that's better. It was a bigger fold and now it's a smaller fold. Right? That's what we're going for? Alright, I'm starting to run into an issue. Everything is getting really hard to bend. That is called work hardening. And the way you fix that is annealing. And the way you anneal is with a torch. So basically for annealing, I'm just using my torch to heat it up. Heat up the area where I've been doing a lot of hammering. You can also tuck shrink with heat, which is what I was trying to do with the other one. Although I would try to get it like red hot and then tuck shrink it, and I don't know. I also don't know how to best decide when I'm done annealing. It's starting to change color. I mean, is that right? I'll just assume that's done. Anyway, the way I did it on the other one was when I had these kind of wrinkles, I would take this one, which has quite a crown on it, I would put it here on the anvil and kind of beat the crowns down. I did get some shrinking action done because it's bent down now. That got a lot more shrinking done than the last one. Maybe my hammer action was a lot better this time. Round 2. So much hammering. Now I notice it makes a different sound when I hit when the metal's on top of the hammer form versus on top of an open spot. Interesting. Now I'm getting another problem. See up here where this is supposed to be more of a sharp bend? It's starting to pop up. And I was told that's not ideal. So we're going to have to see if we can do something about that. The hammer form top here is supposed to keep the top from bulging up, but I guess maybe I should have had it poking out just a little more. I should also mention that nowhere did I read pine is an acceptable hammer form material. I heard MDF and aluminum. I was going to use hickory because hickory is so hard, but it's so hard it messes with my tools, the edges on the tools, and I don't feel like resharpening those all that often. So pine because I had a lot of it. I think I'm starting to form a fold, which is less than ideal. Yeah, I'm getting quite the overlap there. Now this is not the same as forging, just so you know. I'm not heating it red hot and really shaping the metal. I'm just sort of mildly warming it up with a tiny torch to soften it. And it gets hotter when it gets softer when it's hot, but it also gets softer after it's been heated up. Yeah, that seemed to smooth it out a bit. So here I'll try to do something that I attempted and failed to do before, called tuck shrinking. To do it, you can take pliers, perhaps, and bend a little tuck, like a little V, a V kind of shape, and then you heat up the V, this part sticking up, and then hammer it back down, and that can help shrink the metal together. So I'm going to give that a shot right now, since I have it unclamped from the hammer form. There we go. Gonna try to get it good and hot. And mostly hot specifically where I want the shrinking to happen. Also not entirely sure this torch tip has what it takes. You can do it, man! Oh, it's starting to glow. We are getting glowage. It's probably about all the glowage I'm gonna get. We'll shut that off and try to hammer it flat. And hopefully that shrunk it together. It may have, it also may not have. It's kind of hard to tell. It's kind of a slow process. Okay, when I said it didn't fit in the vise, I should have said it doesn't fit in the vise well. I'm just going to bend that out of the way for now. There we go. This might be a bad idea. Trying to tuck shrink on a wooden hammer form. If I start smelling barbecue, I think I'm going to have to give up on this idea. That's probably pretty hot. Yes. So there you have it. It's slightly more curved. I mean, that's pretty much there. That's almost there. That's sticking out a little bit, but it's much better. All right, new idea. This is the first hammer form that I made for making that first fender over there. And I tried to make it double-sided. See, curve there, so I could do it here, flip it around, do another fender here. And it didn't really work for hammering along the form, but I suspect it'll work for my plan B. Plan B is to hammer around the other curve on the other side, making the tucks point inwards, which is kind of what happened the last time around. So the tucks pointed in, and when I hammered them back out over on the vise/anvil thingy, they kind of flattened out. So I'm going to try to repeat that again. You know, all this hammering reminds me of a story. For some reason, everyone really liked that story of my uncle sawing his finger off, or routering his finger off in the flask video. But there's more. To catch you up on that, he He's using a routered his left middle finger off right here, right through that joint. Anyway, what you might not know is that they hold the finger back on with pins, a whole bunch of surgical pins. In the end, I think they probably go through and they got little plastic balls on the end. I don't know if they were push pins or whatever. So anyway, he decided after that he was going to take on a job roofing something. I think it was roofing a church. No idea why he thought that was a good idea, but he soon learned it wasn't such a great idea. Anyway, he cut off his left hand, or his left middle finger, but he's right-handed. So he couldn't like hold up a shingle and hammer. Now, the thing is, I think he was on a steep church. He was doing a steeple, and he was way, way up high, so he didn't have an air nailer. So he's using the hammer. He can't hold the thing and hammer. So he was holding the thing with his right hand, hammering with his left, but his middle finger's sticking out, and he's not left-handed, and he's kind of, clumsy. So you think what would happen is he would hammer his hand, right, because he's not left-handed, and that way he would balance it out, one broken finger on each hand, right? Well, it's not exactly what happened. So there he is, yeah, hammering with his left hand. He's hammering, misses the nail, and jams his left middle finger right into the side of the building on the pins because it's sticking out, because it's pinned together. That it pushes a pin poking out the other side. So it jams the pins in, jams one of them straight through and out the back of his finger. So after what I assume is some colorful language and profuse bleeding, he pulls out his multi-tool with pliers on it, pops off the plastic thing on the end, can't grab the pin to pull it back out. So he grabs the end that's poking out and pulls it through to get it out. And then I assume more colorful language and some profuse bleeding later, takes some painkillers and continues roofing. Because you're already up there, right? Might as well finish the job. I mean, why wouldn't you? He was being paid to do a job, right? Injuring oneself and then continuing to work is sort of a thing in my family, unfortunately. Now check this out. We got a point here that's poking in quite a bit. Kind of like I got the edge close to what I want, but this is an internal bulge. So I'm going to set this over here. Then I'm going to tap the underside of the bulge with this spike thing. So hopefully, since there will be an air gap under this, it'll push that down to match it up kind of with this surface here. Yeah, like that. Yeah, that looks a little better. So my wife is fairly concerned that I inherited this apparent lack of the will to live from my family members. Not will to live. They very much want to live. They just don't care if they end up severely injured, I guess. But I assure you, I did not inherit that. I am much more risk averse, relatively, and I very much want to keep all of my fingers attached and my blood inside my body if it can be helped. Of course, relatively less risk averse. Not a lot of this stuff is very safe. Now, it's kind of hard to see because this isn't very level. I'm going to have to do some cutting and filing. But that's a bit straighter. I'm going to use this dolly. Think of it like a small handheld anvil that can be moved around. I'm going to move it around inside and hammer on the outside of this to try to smooth that out. There are many different sizes and shapes of these dollies. There are many different things. But if you push the dolly up underneath on a low spot and hammer on a high spot, it will sort of bring them together. Okay, so the hammer and dolly work, don't know how clearly that shows up, it kind of smoothed out that transition, which is pretty nice. Still looks pretty gnarly, but the file, if we hit it with a file, it'll kind of clean up whatever is gnarliest looking and show us where the low spots are. Then we can hammer out low spots from the bottom. But first, I want to get the rest of this thing done. Alright, so this is the easy part then. And I'm moving the hammer because I don't want to just dent the crap out of one spot. I want to slightly dent the crap out of the whole thing evenly. Part of me regrets using 20 gauge for this and not going with like 24 or just leaving it plastic the way it was. But then, what excuse would I have to buy all these hammers? Actually, I think I'm going to bend this down first. And really, isn't buying a bunch of tools really what life is all about? It totally isn't. But hey, hammers are fun. You get to beat on stuff. At this point, I'm starting to see the overlap. So it's time to break out the shears and see what we can cut off. Looks like I can just start here. Pulling on cut metal without gloves. Brilliant. Time for more trimmage. And there we have it, that basic shape. Now you see a slight line here and here. That's actually going to be cut off at that point because that's the end of the hammer form, which is the end of the pattern. So that's going to be cut off flush. Probably flush to about there. So this kind of waviness is going to go away. And then we can work on fixing, like, see the little ding sticking out there. There's some spaces that are sticking out there. And I've done some of that already on this one. See, I cut this one much more flush. And I did some filing. You can see where the file hit the high spots and not the low spots. And here I had a lot of low spots and I worked them up and hit with a file and then worked the low spots up and hit them with a file until it's starting to disappear. And then I folded this down nice and flat. But you see, that's kind of the basic idea here for this other fender. And then, you know, weld up where the cut is. The cutting is much less fun. But I'm just going to kind of quickly cut along the edge. I can see the edge. I don't know how well it shows up in the camera, but I can see where the edge of the hammer form was pretty well from the marks left by me hammering. I'm going to clean up this edge. You know, it's still sticking up, so there is more to trim down, but I can trim more off. It's a lot harder to add it on. Fender, roughly done. Ta-da! With much less metal marring than the first one. I just messed the crap out of this metal. This one not so bad, but still pretty bad around the shrinking there. Alright, so in conclusion, hammers are fun, but that took way longer than I thought it would. It was much, much harder. I'm developing a lot more respect for people who can actually do this kind of thing, but I'm assuming they don't just use hammers all the time. Which brings me to the next part of this, folding up all the pieces for the front. Most of those are straight folds, like using a metal brake to get a nice crease. I did these first because that actually involves shaping and shrinking. Also, I don't have a metal brake, and I'm kind of trying to figure out how to get it to work. I got it to work with like aluminum and thin steel, but this thick stuff is a little bit harder to make bend using just lumber. I might just buy a simple metal brake or something. I don't know. Gotta have some tools, right? I can justify some tools, maybe. So I hope you enjoyed, despite all the struggle. More metal shaping to come with this project as this project heats up. Literally heats up. I'm using the torch for some of it, and a welder. Welders get really hot.